All right, let's just dive right into this explainer, shall we? We are going to unpack how a tool that so many people mistakenly think is just some rigid personality test is, in reality, a super dynamic prism. It helps us understand observable behavior in literally every part of our lives. We're talking about the DISC behavioral framework. And the beauty of DISC is that it doesn't box you in. Instead, it categorizes how you prefer to communicate, how you act, and how you naturally respond across completely different environments. But to really understand this framework, we have to start by asking a rather surprising question about its frankly incredible history. What on earth do lie detectors, HR departments, and Wonder Woman all have in common? I know it sounds like the setup to a really bizarre joke, right? But the answer actually connects the dots between an old Harvard laboratory, iconic comic book lore, and how we measure human interaction today. We've got a really fascinating roadmap ahead of us. We'll start with 1, the origins of DISC. 2, the demographics and psychometric science behind it. 3, navigating workplace team dynamics. 4, sales adaptability and AI. And finally, 5, dynamics in romantic relationships. Okay, kicking things off with section 1, the origins of DISC, from blood pressure to behavior. So get this. Back in 1915, a Harvard-trained psychologist named Moulton Marston didn't just lay the groundwork for the modern polygraph. He actually developed the systologic blood pressure test for deception. And fun fact, this was largely inspired by his wife, Elizabeth, who noticed that her own blood pressure spiked whenever she got angry. This research was a huge deal, even setting legal precedents in the 1923 Fry versus United States case. But then, in the 1940s, Marston took a wild pivot. Working alongside his wife and their partner Olive Byrne, he literally created the comic book superhero Wonder Woman. No joke. He used her famous lasso of truth as a direct reflection of his psychological theories on dominance and inducement, compelling anyone bound by it to speak the absolute truth. And that brilliantly illustrates Marston's major breakthrough in his 1928 book, Emotions of Normal People. He mapped out emotional expressions across 2 crucial behavioral axes. Now, unlike his peers who were all hyper-focused on pathology and abnormality, Marston wanted to study psychologically healthy people. So the active-passive axis measures whether you're assertive and fast-paced versus reserved and reflective. Then, the favorable antagonistic axis looks at how you view your environment. Is it friendly and supportive, or is it hostile and challenging? When you intersect these 2 axes, you get the 4 original expressions: dominance, inducement, submission, and compliance. And those, my friends, evolved into the modern DISC styles we use today. Let's keep moving into section 2, demographics and psychometric science, or measuring the observable. So, transitioning from theory to modern science, today's DISC assessments show really excellent internal consistency. Basically, that's just a fancy way of saying the questions reliably measure exactly what they claim to measure. They also show high temporal stability, meaning if you take it today, your results aren't going to drastically change by next week. It also boasts exceptionally small variance across demographics like gender or heritage. The key takeaway here is that it's a highly reliable tool for measuring observable behavior, not diagnosing fixed clinical traits. So definitely don't use it as a rigid hiring filter. Now, when we zoom out and look at global demographics, based on a massive sample of over 500,000 assessments, the numbers are pretty fascinating. It turns out the vast majority of the population relies on steadiness and conscientiousness. In fact, about 80% of us are actually a blend of 2 different styles. Pure dominance, that's exceptionally rare. And the absolute rarest overall profile is the D and S blend. It combines this intense drive to dominate with a desire for collaborative steadiness. Pretty contradictory, right? It just proves how incredibly nuanced human behavior truly is. All right, let's dive into our first practical arena. Section 3, navigating workplace team dynamics. The power of cognitive diversity. Have you ever just wondered why your fast-paced coworker thinks you're moving at a snail's pace? Or maybe why your directness is sometimes taken as personal hostility? Well, team friction usually boils down to 2 natural differences. First up is the pace mismatch. This is active urgency clashing with reserved, systematic processing. Fast-paced folks want to decide right now, while reserved folks want to take a beat and evaluate the risks. Then you have the priority mismatch. This is task-focused execution versus people-focused morale. If you only care about hitting the deadline and stating the cold hard facts, you might accidentally trigger defensiveness in a teammate who deeply values relationship building and overall team consensus. But there is a way to actively fix this. By using structured exercises, teams can bridge these gaps. Take the in other words exercise. You start with just a standard workplace email. Then you rewrite it a brief, results-oriented way for a dominance style. Next, an enthusiastic, highly social version for an influence style. Then, a warm, supportive version for a steadiness style. And finally, an analytical, super detailed version for a conscientiousness style. It's literally a game changer for mastering tone and detail. It ensures your communication actually lands effectively with everyone and shifts workplace conflicts from you versus me to us versus the problem. Let's switch gears to the high-stakes world of sales. Section 4, Sales Adaptability and AI. Pacing and predicting the buyer. The Everything Disc sales model outlines 8 specific priorities of the sales cycle. We're talking action, enthusiasm, relationships, sincerity, dependability, quality, competency, and results. Now, buyers evaluate solutions through these very distinct priorities. So if a salesperson just defaults to overusing their own natural style, they totally risk alienating the client. For example, if a rep heavily favors competency and relies on deep technical jargon, they might come across as overly critical or cold to a buyer who really just wants a warm, relationship-focused partnership. You absolutely have to learn how to read the room. Now, what's really wild is how modern AI tools are totally revolutionizing this prep work. Platforms like Crystal Knows or Humantic.ai are actually scanning public texts, things like LinkedIn profiles, past articles, emails, to estimate a prospect's DISC style with 70 to 85% accuracy before you even have your first meeting. This gives sales reps a literal roadmap for their pacing and tone before they even say hello. They know right out of the gate whether to start directly with bottom-line results for a D-style buyer or to slow things way down and provide documented analytical data for a C-style prospect. Finally, let's bring it into the living room. Section 5, Dynamics in Romantic Relationships, from public masks to private comfort. When relationship coaches analyze couples, they often look at what they call the 3 states of self. First, you have the perceived self. That's your internal view of your own self-worth. Then there's the public self. This is the behavioral adjustment you make in new situations. Think about being on your absolute best behavior during those early dates, right? And then there's the private self. Your natural, completely comfortable style when you're just chilling at home. Now, when couples move from early dating to a long-term commitment, they naturally transition from that idealized public self into their relaxed private self. And here's the kicker. This shift can sometimes be totally misinterpreted as a loss of effort or affection, when in reality, it's actually just a sign of security and comfort. Let's look at how different pairings actually play out in real life. Take a D and S couple, for instance. This pairs fast-paced direction with supportive patience. It can create a beautifully balanced dynamic, provided, and this is a big provided, the S-style partner doesn't build up silent resentment by constantly accommodating just to keep the peace. On the flip side, an influence and conscientiousness pairing blends high social energy with careful analysis. The secret sauce here is for the analytical C-style partner to genuinely validate the enthusiastic partner's ideas before introducing any logical critiques. Honestly, even same-style couples like 2 S's or 2 C's have to be careful not to get bogged down in decision fatigue over simple stuff like picking where to eat for dinner. Now, of course, under high stress, we all have our negative hot buttons, those unsupportive habits we just naturally revert to. A D-style might suddenly become highly demanding. An I-style might act impulsively, just looking for validation. An S-style could display passive-aggressive resistance, while a C-style might totally withdraw and become overly critical. But knowing these triggers is half the battle. It helps us choose sincere communication alternatives instead. If you realize that your partner withdrawing is just their natural behavioral stress response and not a personal attack on you, you can frame your critiques constructively and actually maintain your connection. So, if you take away absolutely nothing else from this explainer, remember this quote: behavioral adaptation is driven by empathy. Whether you're trying to manage a cognitively diverse team at work, attempting to close a massive deal with a hesitant buyer, or just resolving a late-night argument with your partner, choosing to adjust your behavior to meet someone else where they are is the ultimate act of respect. It's how we build a truly shared language. As we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Knowing what you know now about the pace and priorities of the people around you, what is your private self? And more importantly, how will you consciously adapt your communication style tomorrow morning? Think about the folks you interact with every single day, and consider what small shift you could make to transform everyday friction into real collaboration. Thanks so much for exploring the prism of behavior with me today.